How can we best design a summer reading program for students? If we provide students with reading materials, is it better to provide conceptually coherent and rigorous books, or books on a variety of topics that are leveled near students' end-of-year reading ability? Additionally, how can we engage parents in supporting their children's reading over the summer? These questions are explored in research by the Reads Lab, as described in a journal article in AERA Open. I'm Catherine Asher, one of the authors of the study, and in this video I will briefly outline two of our main findings from this research. In this study, we worked with kindergarten through second grade students spread across 16 different classrooms at one high-poverty elementary school. The students were all able to select 10 books of their choice. They also received a set of reading lessons at the end of the school year and access to a free educational reading app with activities matched to each of the books that they had selected. The classrooms were randomized such that students in half of the classrooms initially selected their 10 books from a set of challenging and conceptually coherent informational texts, and half selected a mix of fiction and nonfiction books near their reading level. Randomizing the groups means that on average, the students in the two conditions will be the same, and that later differences that we see are the causal impact of our intervention. As we mentioned previously, one of the main questions explored is whether conceptually coherent, rigorous texts help students grow more in their reading ability over the summer than texts that are matched to students' current reading level. The conceptually coherent texts are designed to help children leverage domain knowledge in science and to connect new learning from the texts to their pre-existing schema or knowledge structure. Although such texts are not leveled or matched to a child's reading ability, there is growing experimental evidence that children show greater gains during reading activities with conceptually coherent texts than with leveled texts. Now, let's turn to some results from the study. Our statistical analyses controlled for student pretests and demographic characteristics to provide us with a more precise estimate of the impact of the intervention. Let's look at two outcomes: science vocabulary knowledge immediately after the intervention, and reading comprehension related to informational texts when students return to school in the fall. In both cases, we see that the students exposed to the conceptually coherent texts, the green bars, scored higher than the students who received leveled texts, the yellow bars. It should be pointed out that these differences are not statistically significant, which means that they could have been due to chance. But because the use of leveled texts is so common in schools, it is important to show that we have no evidence that these challenging texts are worse for students. The study actually used a slightly more sophisticated research design called a sequential multiple assignment randomized trial, or a SMART design. After their initial random assignments to either conceptually coherent texts or leveled texts, students were also assigned into two groups of extra supports that they could receive over the summer if they didn't seem to be engaged in the program. More detailed information about the design can be found in the research paper, but the main takeaway is that we were also able to rigorously study how to support student and family engagement with summer reading. So let's turn to this question: how can we engage students and their families over the summer? As we mentioned, all students had the opportunity to use an educational app over the summer with activities matched to the books that the students had selected. A few families quickly took up the opportunity to use the app, but the majority of families did not. We call the families who did not use the app initially non-responders because they did not respond or engage with the intervention in the way that we had hoped. Our second research question asked what additional supports are more effective at encouraging these non-responder families to use the app and support their students' reading. Two approaches were used to entice students. One was to gamify the app or to turn it into a game. The goal was to make it more engaging and fun so that the child wanted to play. The other approach was, in addition to gamifying the app, we also sent text messages to parents with tips on reading behaviors and information about the app's features. As we mentioned, students were randomly assigned to one of these two strategies. We find that the combination of gamification and texting parents produces better outcomes than just gamification. First, those who were assigned to text messages and gamification were more likely to use the app than those whose support was just gamification. We also see that those assigned to receive text messages scored higher on fall assessments of reading comprehension on informational texts than those who only received gamification. This finding in particular is statistically significant, which means that we have good reason to believe that it wasn't just due to chance. Overall, this study shows that offering nudges and tips about reading can help reduce the summer slide, or when students lose reading ability when they are not in school. Even with texts, it is important to note that the majority of our students did not engage with our app over the summer. We hope to continue to improve the take-up of the app with time. Returning to our first question, though we did not see statistically significant differences, this study does find that our students who received conceptually coherent books did better than those who received leveled books. We saw these positive differences even though the conceptually coherent texts were much more challenging than the students' reading levels at the time. This suggests that exposing students to conceptually coherent and rigorous texts can be an effective way to improve students' reading. Thank you for watching this video. For further information on this and other resources and studies from the Reads Lab, you can visit our website at readslab.org.